The year 2022 begins with uncertainty for the Vatican and the rest of the world. The pandemic prevents the Pope from making long-term plans and characterizes his various messages. This year, Pope Francis will continue advocating for vaccination and urging that poor countries be given access to COVID-19 vaccines. The papal trips also depend on how the pandemic develops. Pope Francis is preparing a meeting with the Orthodox Patriarch of Moscow, which could take place in Finland or Kazakhstan in the first half of the year.
Io sono disposto sempre, anche sono disposto ad andare a Mosca per dialogare con un fratello. Non ci sono dei protocolli.
It's also possible that Pope Francis will travel to Santiago de Compostela in August to mark 40 years since John Paul II launched a message to Europe from the Spanish city. In September, he could travel to Canada to meet with indigenous communities who were mistreated by Catholics in the past.
La triste scoperta accresce ulteriormente la consapevolezza dei dolori e delle sofferenze del passato.
Pope Francis also accepted Prime Minister Narendra Modi's invitation to visit India, but they have not yet announced a date. Before the pandemic broke out, plans were underway for papal visits to Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, East Timor, and South Sudan, which could take place if the conditions are right. Catholics in Ukraine believe that the Pope will certainly travel to their country this year to prevent a war with Russia, though the Vatican has not said anything about such a trip.
Desidero assicurare la mia preghiera per la cara Ucraina.
The Pope's hope is to resume holding large celebrations at the Vatican if the pandemic allows. The last religious ceremony to take place in St. Peter's Square was the canonization of Cardinal John Henry Newman on October 13, 2019. The next similar event could take place on May 15th with the canonization of Charles de Foucauld, or on September 4th with the beatification of John Paul I. Pope Francis has another big event on his agenda. It's the World Meeting of Families in Rome. The Pope will celebrate Mass for participants on Saturday, June 25th, and will pray the Angelus with them on Sunday, June 26th. Another important day at the Vatican will be Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI's 95th birthday on April 16th, but because of his delicate health, it's unlikely that any special celebrations will be held. In July 2021, the Pope underwent intestinal surgery, and he struggled with sciatica. That's why it's also possible that his health will continue to make headlines in 2022.
Vi ringrazio tutti.
In 2022, 10 cardinals will turn 80 years old, for which reason they will lose the right to participate in a conclave. Pope Francis will convoke a consistory of new cardinals to replace them. For months, the publication of a new constitution to reform the Vatican Curia has been anxiously anticipated. The text is already written, but the Pope still has to sign it. The idea is to decentralize the Curia and focus more on evangelization. One of the year's main topics will be preparation for the Synod on Synodality, which will be celebrated in 2023. The Pope has been promoting meetings in cities all around the world, because the idea of the Synod is to remind every baptized Catholic of his or her responsibility within the Church.
Il clericalismo, che come tentazione perversa serpeggia quotidianamente in mezzo a noi, ci fa pensare sempre a un Dio che parla solo a alcuni, mentre gli altri devono solo ascoltare e seguire.
Starting in January, the court trial against Cardinal Angelo Becciu and others involved in the Vatican Secretariat of State's finances will resume. The case is turning out to be more complicated than expected and could take many more months than originally thought to resolve.